question.
I appreciate you being here today, Mr. Secretary. Want to ask you a few questions about Doge and the role it's playing at Treasury. You came into office, I guess you were sworn in on the 27th, was it? You were confirmed by the Senate on the 27th? Is that about right?
28th.
28th, okay. And then you started working at Treasury immediately after that? All right, and Doge began working there as well with respect to the payment systems?
Two individuals from Doge who were actually Treasury employees were on site.
Okay. And I believe you were approached by the highest ranking career official at Treasury, David Lebrick. Am I pronouncing his name correctly?
I believe it's Lebrick.
Lebrick, okay. What was the nature of that conversation? I assume this was about the Doge issue, but tell me briefly what that conversation was about.
Well, that conversation was about a discussion of the payment system. And when I go back to what I didn't know, I think I walked in the office around 3 p.m., and I think he and I were having a conversation at 4:30, and
I got to ask for the short version.
Oh, no.
Okay.
But you know, I will tell you that when we were talking about the tasks, that it was people like this individual who were hitting send on the payments. So, you know, I've come to find out that he's part of the
Okay, I
problem.
apologize. I'll have to get that later from you.
Yep.
Feel free to send in substance of the discussion in a letter. But I guess what I was going to ask was, you just mentioned there were two people who were working with respect to Doge at the time.
Yes, sir.
And Mark Ilez was one of those?
I'm not sure.
Not sure? You're not familiar with that name?
I don't recall that name. I interviewed Tom Krause and personally recommended him to work at Treasury.
Okay. Well, Mr. Ilez had worked at Mr. Musk's SpaceX company. And the Wall Street Journal issued a story, I think around February 7th, that talked about statements that Mr. Ilez had made in the prior year. One was, you could not pay me to marry outside my ethnicity. Another was that he wanted to normalize Indian hate. A third was, just for the record, I was racist before it was cool. And another was, I just want a eugenic immigration policy. Is that too much to ask? This man resigned shortly after that article was published, but you don't recall him being there?
Congressman, I did not recall that individual's name, but that individual was terminated.
He was terminated, okay. Well, I appreciate that. Although it appears that he then later turned up that he was rehired, I guess, and that he's continuing.
Not by Treasury, sir.
Okay, but he was continuing to do work for Doge, but in this instance, HHS and 3 other departments? You have no idea.
I didn't follow his career.
Okay. Well, you didn't catch J.D. Vance saying that he didn't think he should be terminated? Did you miss that too?
I don't recall that.
All right. Do you recall Mr. Trump saying that he should have a second chance?
I don't recall that.
No. Okay. And do you recall Mr. Musk saying he should be given a second chance as well?
No, sir.
All right. Well, I guess the main question too here is, what exactly was the vetting practice that you had in place before you brought on these 2 people and gave them access to the payment system, which is $6 trillion?
Well, sir, they did not have access to the payment system, or perhaps we have a different definition of access. They only had read-only abilities, and it was they were there for tech support to look at the payment system, the ERP system, just like any private enterprise.
Is this an individual that you would have brought on even in that capacity if you'd known that he'd made these statements prior to him becoming part of that team?
Congressman, that I think it's very difficult to monitor everyone's social media.
That's not what I asked.
before they're
If you
hired.
knew that he had made these statements, would you have brought him on in the capacity that he had at the Department of Treasury?
I think the Office of Personnel Management would have flagged that.
Would you have brought him on?
Sir, again, I'm not going to speculate.
The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Lalota, for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Secretary. Good to be with you this morning, sir. I'd like to use my time to talk about taxes and trade. As head of Treasury, you advise the president on taxes and trade, sir?
That there's access to, but in order to try and be preemptive with respect to terrorism or other types of efforts where you wouldn't have time to get the warrant. Very close vote, but the compromise was that reports were going to be filed by the FBI on a regular basis, I think to the Judiciary Committee. My understanding is we haven't gotten one yet, so I would encourage you to do that. And if you're not familiar with what happened during that era, I'd encourage you to take a look. It was one of the really most problematic scenarios the FBI had in the last 4 years. Mr. Patel, I'll tell you, I didn't support your nomination or your confirmation, but I appreciate what you're saying here today, especially the offer to work with us in trying to address a lot of these concerns. I think I appreciate what you said about your the budget issue, because if you're saying you think you need more than what the skinny budget's giving, I strongly agree. I was really concerned to see the $540 million plus cut to the FBI, and the rationale was that it was going to be, DEI school board meetings and gender ideology, and there's not $500 million worth of cuts related to that, regardless of how one might feel about whatever those issues were. And I really do believe that the FBI is the greatest investigative body in the world, and the strongest asset that you have are your team, your human resources there. And I think you said something about eliminating 1,100 positions and having to fire 13 more, that you didn't want to do that, but given potential budgetary impacts, you might have to do that. That would be horrible for the FBI, especially right now. So we certainly will work with you to protect your budget. A couple quick points with respect to your testimony. One concern that I did have was, there were some things that you really didn't touch on in your testimony. And I appreciate Teslas as an issue, and whoever's setting those on fire should be held accountable for that. But we've got serious political violence here in the United States, a lot of homegrown activity that we need to focus on. Your predecessor testified a lot about it, and we understood the importance of that. Some of us had a chance to work on the task force that investigated the attempted assassination of now President Donald Trump, and I know you've got another pending case with respect to Mar-a-Lago. I think that might be one of the things you want to talk about, not just what happened then, but what's being done following up on that, because there continue to be issues. Governor Shapiro's house being set on fire was another horrific example of that. Also domestic terrorism with respect, you mentioned New Orleans in your oral testimony today, but that's the kind of homegrown terrorism issues that I think we need to focus on, and really only the FBI can get at that in the way that we need to have done. Brian Thompson, that assassination, the United Healthcare CEO, was another example of that. The political violence, or violent crime issue that you just mentioned a moment ago, I've got mixed feelings about the decentralization of your staff. I take the point that you want to make, and my only encouragement would be that you take it slow, especially with specialized positions to see. We did a mini version of this here in Washington, D.C., 25 years ago when we went to political neighborhood prosecution and policing. Some of it worked and some of it didn't. Some of the specialty units, like the homicide unit, needed to be re-centralized again because you needed that expertise, concentrated. And the current office, whether it's political integrity investigations, that might be one that you want to keep centralized. Civil rights is another one. So I hope you'll consider being careful about how you move forward with that. And my district is Maryland. We love having you guys nearby, and certainly would love to have you come out even more so. If you're going to do sending the agents out, my request would be that you target jurisdictions where they have serious violent crime. I was a local DA there. We were able to do joint prosecutions. The U.S. attorney at that time was Rod Rosenstein. We did some joint work, RICO cases. We didn't have RICO capability. We took the cases to him. This is MS-13. And so, you know, when you do joint efforts like that, it can really help local prosecutors and local law enforcement, because the FBI has resources that they can bring to bear that we just don't at the local level, and the impact can be really significant. So I thank you for what you've done so far and your offer to work with us, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Gonzalez.
He did it with a
Ivey.
straight face, too. He had me fooled there. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did want to follow up on a couple of the answers that you gave a few minutes ago with respect to, I guess it's the division of labor jurisdiction with respect to the SEC and the CFTC, and also the collectibles comment. With respect to some of the meme coin issues that I asked about a moment ago, my understanding is that the Trump meme website says that they're not intended to be or to be subject of an investment opportunity, investment contract, or security of any type. And so it sounds like they're talking about this in terms of it being a gift. It appears the Trump group is not soliciting money in exchange for an investment or tangible product, but soliciting money in exchange for nothing. That is, asking for a gift that will benefit them personally. And that would raise emolument clause issues potentially, especially since it appears that many of the investors in these vehicles are foreign investors. I wanted to see if you could clarify for me what you meant by the collectibles comment, and whether you think if it is a collectible, does that mean SEC has the jurisdiction over it, CFTC, or some other entity? Who's guarding the hen house right now, basically? And then the other part, too, is it a gift or is it something else?
Well, thanks for the question. I don't really know, other than what I've read in the paper about, this particular coin, or, what its, the attributes are to it. But I can say in general, is what I was talking about before, that, these sorts of issuances are for, it's a collectible, like a baseball card or whatever. In the Congresswoman had mentioned Beanie Babies. But so the people buy all sorts of things for collectability, and that's kind of obviously the way of the world there. But as far as the other attributes, if it fits within, and this is why I think we need clear rules of the road. Right now, what really governs is this 1946 decision regarding orange groves that the Supreme Court came down with, called Howey versus SEC. And so it sets out, various, attributes for an investment contract. So
Well, before the chairman cuts me off from a time standpoint, just to follow up, I'll get the Steny treatment, I guess. I get a little extra time. While this determination is being made, these are tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars that are floating around. And it's especially concerning for two reasons. One is the overlap with Mr. Sun's case that is before the SEC. It's on pause right now, but it's still pending. And the other is because, the president and his family are getting hundreds of millions of dollars, apparently, through these vehicles. It seems to me somebody needs to be taking a look at this now. Now, you've said that you can't talk about whether you have an open investigation or not. And you did talk about how investigations can be triggered, I guess, through some sort of internal box. Can it be triggered by a request from Congress to conduct an investigation on these issues? Because you've got at least one letter with respect to the insider trading piece. You've got another letter that raises these transactions with respect to the meme coins. are those sufficient to generate or initiate an investigation at the SEC on these matters?
Well, first of all, we take very seriously letters from Congress, and I commit. So unlike what I understand in the past, I commit that we will respond to letters from Congress. But with respect to this particular issue, again, there are a lot of very ambitious and smart people in the enforcement division, and so I
do appreciate that, but it doesn't get much bigger than this. If it's a constitutional violation with respect to the emoluments clause, somebody needs to be looking at this now. And I don't know if that's you. I don't know if it's the CFTC, although you said the two of you meet, and to make sure, quote, nothing falls between the cracks. We can't let this fall through the cracks, and we can't let it drag out. You all need to make a determination soon, I think, and start looking at this if you haven't already, just to make sure we're moving in the right direction and to restore the.
Thank you, Mr. Evers. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Ivey, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Carr. Good morning. Appreciate you being here. I did want to follow up on some of the DEI questions that Congressman Bishop had raised. You were sworn in on, was it January 20th? You were sworn in?
Designated.
Designated, okay. Did you begin working at the FCC on that date?
I've been there actually, believe it or not, since 2012, straight, with no break.
Okay. And then on February 27th, you sent a letter to Verizon, essentially accusing them of invidious discrimination. Do you recall doing that?
Yes.
Okay. And then you got a letter back from Verizon dated May 15 from their EVP, Chief Legal Officer, that didn't acknowledge or admit invidious discrimination, but said that it had made some changes to its DEI policies. You recall that?
Yes.
Okay. And that was May 15th. Then May 16th, you issued a press release with respect to the Verizon Frontier merger. You recall that? All right. That's a yes for
Yes,
the
sir.
record?
Yes.
Okay. And then the memorandum order and opinion was released that same day. And that day was when the FCC approved the request with respect to the merger that I guess had been held up in part during your determination with respect to the DEI issue. Is that right?
Well, Congressman, with respect to this transaction and all transactions, we run a normal course process at the FCC, and we specifically have rules on our books that deal with EEO, that deal with non-discrimination.
I'll come to that in a second, but the day after you received the letter back from Verizon, the FCC approved the request, right?
Correct.
All
Yes.
right. And in the order that you issued, well, first of all, in the letter that you sent, you didn't, well, let me ask it this way. Before you sent that letter, essentially alleging invidious discrimination committed by Verizon, had the FCC done any kind of investigation with respect to any complaints of discrimination at Verizon that led you to write that letter?
Well, as a general matter, two things have taken place.
Not a general matter. Did you review any particular allegations against Verizon before you sent this letter?
Again, Congressman, there's two things that we're doing. One is when I started as chair, what we did is we ended the FCC's own promotion.
No.
of DEI.
I'm asking if there's a factual basis for the letter that you sent. And if so, was it investigations with respect to complaints against Verizon? Were there any complaints that you reviewed that had been filed with the EEOC alleging discrimination against Verizon? Were there any court cases that you reviewed alleging discrimination against Verizon?
Well,
Any of those?
one of the things that we've been very clear about,
Sir,
Is
I
that-
only have 5 minutes. Did you do any of that before you issued this letter?
what I'm saying is we have a standard of non-discrimination.
That's not what I'm
And what I've made
asking.
clear to
I'm
everybody.
asking if you had a factual basis. And the reason I'm asking is because when you allege invidious discrimination, and the cases you cited, Supreme Court cases, say that you have to have a factual basis to support the claim. And they're very specific about what those factual bases are. For example, suspect classification. Did you have anybody alleging racial discrimination or religious discrimination that you reviewed those matters before you issued this letter?
Those limitations that you're speaking about apply in the context of those types of cases, but that's not the rule that applies at the FCC. The FCC
I'm just
has
asking
non-discrimination rules on
I'm
our
just
books.
asking if you reviewed anything before you sent this letter.
If you look at the letter
I did.
from Verizon, it walks through a number of practices, including practices that I was aware of when I sent that letter.
But none of those actually admit, as you just acknowledged, invidious discrimination, right? In fact, none of them actually deal with any of the suspect classifications, like race, for example. That would be the basis for a finding of invidious discrimination. Let me move on. Real quick, in the order that you issued in paragraph 33, which is the only one that deals with the DEI issue, it references the letter that you got back from Verizon, but it doesn't state anything about any kind of factual basis that the FCC developed to support the original allegation that you made of invidious discrimination. If you'd had any evidence to that effect, would you have put it in the order?
Well, Congressman, again, I think what you're raising are factual points that are
Okay.
relevant
Well,
to like a
it-
1983
will
action.
you
in
at least
court, but that's-
acknowledge-
Let
that's-
the gentleman answer.
Well, if I get additional
but
time, I'd be
you're-
happy to.
You're asking us if we
but-
followed
Let him answer
a
it, and then we're
process
moving
and a
on.
standard that doesn't apply in the context of the FCC. We follow the FCC's processes. The FCC has non-discrimination rules on the books.
that
The
are not based on,
Communications Act
you can
talks
make
about
you can make an
non-discrimination.
allegation of invidious discrimination without having any facts to support the claim
Yes.
under the FCC? That is not true.
Chair
Okay, well,
recognizes the gentleman from Missouri. Chair now recognizes Mr. Ivey for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. I was shocked when I heard you say that all government employees should be treated with respect, because that is absolutely not what I saw on the ground level. I mean, I saw people crying when they were coming out of USAID. I think they'd been given 15-minute intervals to retrieve their belongings. I talked to people who were probationary employees who'd been given these mass emails that they're going to be terminated. They'd quit jobs and moved from other places, sold their houses to come do this work in reasonable reliance on often for the government to work for the federal government and desire to serve their country. And they were unceremoniously pushed out the door. And when you said, I know you want to know what career staff thinks, that was a shocker to me too, because many of these people, when they were being forced out, were trying to call and find out what their status was, whether they were going to be able to come back to work or not, when they would be terminated, all of those things. And that still goes on. And they don't get the answers from you all. So, I appreciate your view of what's going on, but you got to know that it's entirely different from the standpoint of the people who were going through this. And I just want to focus on 3 quick areas where there's a potential impact. I mean, one thing you said that was interesting to me, you're going to ask for additional 20 positions, if I heard you correct,
Yes, sir.
at OMB. It's a little ironic because you're slashing positions across the government and funding. But we had the FBI director testify here a few weeks ago, and he came in and said he has 1,100 vacancies, I think it is, and he needs 1,300 additional. I think we can all agree that the importance of public safety, and someone just mentioned fraud, nobody ferrets it out better than the FBI. Yet, the day after he testified here, he testified in the Senate and said, I don't need those positions after all. And then just one quick point on the fraud piece. I saw an FBI agent who runs the fraud division testify that between $500 and $700 million every year is stolen from the United States by our overseas adversaries, and that they needed additional resources to track that down. But apparently you guys aren't going to give that to them. With respect to national security and the science piece of this too, the trauma quote's been read to you, and I heard your comment, it's taken out of context, and I listened to that speech. I don't agree. I think it was consistent with what you were saying that day, but let's just assume for the moment that what you're saying there is really true. The bottom line is that the actions that you've taken since then reiterates the message that you're trying to traumatize these people and that you want to treat them like villains. And so what we've got going on right now on the science and tech piece that's rippling through NASA and other agencies where it's critical for us to have these science and tech folks, AI, the competition for quantum computing and the like, they think they're being forced out of these positions. They're starting to look to go to Europe. They're starting to look to go back to Korea or India or other places rather than staying here and doing the work. And I know from businesses in my district that they need people from overseas because we're not producing enough of them over here in the United States. Yet we're narrowing the pipeline based on what you're doing with respect to cutting grants to help fund. We're narrowing the pipeline with respect to the impact you're having on the universities in science and tech. We're narrowing the pipeline with respect to the postdocs and other people doing the research and the government contractors who are doing much of this work too. So over and over again, we're squeezing that line down. If you look at the contrast with China, they're doing exactly the opposite. And they're doing exactly the opposite in the areas where we're in the most competitive areas and where we really need to win. We don't want China to get ahead of us militarily. We don't want China to get ahead of us on quantum computing and AI. But we're making cuts to NIST. We're making cuts to NASA. We're making cuts to the NIH. We're making cuts across the board on some of the most important aspects of what we need to do in the United States to maintain that lead. And with respect to public health, I see my time's running out here, and I guess we can do a second round in a minute, but same kind of thing. The cuts to NIH, my father died from Alzheimer's. I'm a cancer survivor. You guys shut down clinical trials in the middle of those going forward. And it's not like we can just flip a switch and it comes back and starts over again. Some of those are going to take years to catch back up to where they were. And some of the people who were conducting the research are leaving the United States because they don't want to have that happen again. So look, I appreciate the goal of going after waste, fraud, and abuse. I don't think that that's what you all have really focused on here, your impact certainly, because we can go through that in the second round, but you're really undermining our ability to compete and stay ahead of China on really critical areas like national security and public safety.
Chair now recognizes.
Mr. Ivey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to follow up, Mr. Secretary, with respect to the Chair's questions about EDA. You mentioned 80 programs with respect to, which sounded like maybe the same 80 programs you were talking about for MBDA.
Yeah, from the GAO, and I'll send you that report. You've asked for it, I will find it, and I will send it to you.
Okay, I appreciate that. Real quick point, the prices will come down point with respect to the impact on small businesses and retail and the like. I just want to say that, I've got a lot of small business. I'm sure there are plenty across the country who can't wait. They're really up against the wall right now. The wolf is at the door. Their businesses are at risk of being shut down. So the faster this resolves, the better. I know you mentioned July 9 with respect to the tariffs, and that can't come soon enough. And I hope that whatever happens on July 9, there is some effort to pay attention to what's happening to these businesses in the country. They're multinational, corporations, they'll survive, but smaller businesses that are really, struggling to make ends meet, they don't have that luxury. They don't have that kind of margin. Real quick on NIST, and you heard them, I think, from both sides of the aisle with respect to the need for a budget that gives more detail. And actually, I just saw you testified. I think you said you're reviewing all 5,700 contracts that, I don't think it was FEMA, but it was NOAA. And you said you're reviewing all of them. And so someone who's gonna...
All above $100,000.
Yeah, okay. Someone who pays that level of attention to detail when you were a CEO, I'm sure that you demanded something better than the skinny budget when you were making corporate decisions for your business. You had to. And I know that when you go through these contracts in the way that you are, that's the attention to detail that we want to actually provide in our roles here in Congress and in functioning and carrying out our aspect of the appropriations process. So please give us that level of information so we can do our job carefully and closely too. And then real quick point with respect to NIST. Again, in the skinny budget, there's a $325 million reduction under that category. I don't really know where the money's coming from. But NIST is a critical agency, as you know, with respect to cyber and quantum and the like. You got a letter from, I guess, in concern about this, Software and Information Industry Association, CCIA, ITIF, Center for Data Innovation, a bunch of private industry leaders, TechNet, raising questions about where these cuts are going to come from and what's being done with them. The work done at NIST is not just a matter of maintaining technical excellence, it's a direct investment in ensuring that American industry continues to set the global benchmark for innovation. And we emphasize that NIST work represents a high-value investment that directly contributes to U.S. economic growth, competitiveness, and technological leadership. We caution that downsizing NIST or eliminating these initiatives will have ramifications for the ability of the American AI industry to continue to lead globally. So I share those concerns. I'd like to add to the record this article, Eric Geller, NIST loses key cyber experts and standards and research. For the record, NIST is playing a critical role in our competition with respect to AI for quantum across the board. I don't know what cuts you're talking about making with respect to them because of the level of or lack of detail with respect to the budget. But please be careful in the cuts that you make here. I don't know that any of them are justified necessarily. I can't really tell. But cutting NIST at this time, and that chart I tried to show you that you couldn't see, the quantum competition, we need all hands on deck. This is a critical time for the United States right now. Making cuts to those industries or to those aspects of the government, they're such key players with respect to the industries. This couldn't be a worse time to do it. So I appreciate your leadership on this and hope that you will continue to make sure that the United States can take a leadership role in these industries.
We are not cutting in quantum. We are not cutting in AI, but there are old programs that need to be re-examined, and that money can be used better. And the last thing I would say is we keep talking about small businesses. 90% of our businesses are American businesses, and we keep talking about 10% that import. If you build in America, you're being protected by the tariffs. It's good for small business in America that build in America. 90% of them build in America.
Not all businesses build in America, as you just heard from
90%.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Mr. Ivey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Secretary. I wanted to join quickly with the comments from the chair and the ranking member regarding NOAA. And I hear your point about fake news and numbers, but I'll say this. I mean, I have 2 NOAA installations in my district, and headquarters is, I don't know, just a couple miles across the line. And I heard a very different story than what you're saying about people being forced out of there. But I look forward to getting the answers that you provide here. Also saw your comments with respect to Senator Van Hollen yesterday. I look forward to seeing your responses to his questions too. Wanted to ask you about MBDA, which the ranking member raised as well. During your confirmation hearing on January 29th before the Senate Commerce Committee, Senator Blunt Rochester asked, yes or no, do you support dismantling the MBDA? And you said, I do not. Now, I got the skinny budget numbers here, and it's got EDA and MBDA combined with a cut for $624 million. And in the narrative connected with that, it says that MBDA, the agency, is fully eliminated. So I wanted to ask you what changed and what's the status of MBDA at this point?
MBDA is not being fully eliminated. That's inaccurate. We are reducing it to its statutory minimum size, as is appropriate. The problem I see with MBDA.
Could I ask you before you move on, what does that mean, statutory minimum size?
I mean, it is required by law to be a certain size, and we will have it be a certain size.
What size is that?
It was 65 people. I think that's less than 10 people.
Okay, and why are you doing
These are both
that?
small size. The problem is The GAO gives me a report that says there are 80 other programs and 80 institutions that are so much larger, 10 times larger, that achieve the same outcomes. And we are just too small and too inefficient to do it correctly. So I think we are better served
Well,
having other programs.
I apologize
take care
because
of
I've
it.
got a couple other areas to hit. I'd love to see that GAO report. I want to know what those 80 other entities are because I'm not aware of them. Maybe SBA has an overlap with the MBDA mission, but the other, I don't know what those other ones could be. But I look forward to hearing back from you on that because I think it's an important agency. It's statutory, so it needs to be maintained certainly at some level. And there's a lot of benefit from it. I would also mention the Congressional Black Caucus sent you a letter on this issue and asked for a response by April 18th. I don't think we've received it yet, so I would ask that you provide that response as well. Let me move quickly to quantum technology. This is kind of a quicker point for me, but quantum computing, this chart shows basically funding by governments. China, as you can see, far outpaces the United States. We've got a couple of other.
I couldn't see it, but I was guessing the top bar.
Yeah.
I didn't need to see the words. I got the point.
Fair enough, fair enough. Well, here's the question, because this is concerning, obviously, and you touched on this a bit in your opening testimony. You only talked about the enforcement side of competition with China, and clearly they are stealing a lot of our data. But they're also committing a lot of engineers, scientists, and resources to outpacing us on the legitimate side of this too, from the competitive side. I don't see that being reflected in not just the Commerce Department, but the overall U.S. budget. IonQ is a company in my district. It's a spinoff from the University of Maryland's incubator. We have a lot of those across the country. Quick point, oh man, I'm out of time already. The cuts that are being made, and there's an article I'll submit for the record here. World scientists look elsewhere as U.S. labs stagger under Trump cuts. New York Times, cuts in research and scientists brain drain. As we push these people out, I mean, you can shake your head if you want, but I went to visit IonQ. And one of the things that came up was, I was like, how many of these people are from the United States? And he said, not many. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, in part because the pipeline isn't supplying these here in the United States, so we go overseas to get many of them. And one last quick point on this. A venture capital firm I had a chance to meet with said that they invest in, I think there are about 30 of these they invest in. They've started setting up shop in Canada because they can get their engineers and scientists from overseas quicker over there. They don't have to go through the immigration piece. So we're losing money on that front. So look forward to hearing from you on that. Mr. Chairman, I apologize for the overrun and I appreciate your generosity.
Mr. Klein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to follow up on what Congressman Gonzalez raised with you with respect to the new environment that we're in now with the essentially a war with Iran. A few weeks ago, your FBI director sat in the same chair and said that he thought in the budget that's been proposed, they're about $11.2 billion short. He wanted an additional 1,100 positions that were lost to attrition and 1,300 he wanted to have filled. That's before the scenario with Iran. Now, I know you submitted the budget already and you want to stick with it, but please take another look. This is a new environment. I think the points that the congressman raised are very valid with respect to the issue of sleeper cells and threats domestically here. Taking FBI agents off the street now is a bad, there isn't a worst possible time you could do it. So please reconsider that and move in a different direction on that because we need more of them on the street, not fewer. Ms. DeLauro was raising issues with respect to your budget, the IOI cuts and the 86 agents that are going to be cut too. And the concern I have on that front, I know you're saying they want to be on the street, but there are ATF agents that do things that aren't on the street. So like, for example, the NIBIN work where they match the cartridges to the guns. is critical. And I'm very concerned that some of the cuts you're going to make are going to impact that. And the Nibbin piece is critical for state and local law enforcement. It's like you used to be, because a lot of them don't have the resources to track it down. And the information that they can get, you can turn it around in 48 hours. So the man who attempted to assassinate now President Trump, the connection that was made was through this apparatus, this approach. The same thing with the Minnesota assassin. So that's an area where we can't afford to have those kind of cuts, I don't think, at this time. And the performance of fewer regulatory inspections. I had gun dealers in my district who needed those inspections to take place. And important findings have been made, certainly with respect to tracking crime guns and cracking down on gun dealers who are working illicitly. I'm not saying they all do. I mean, many of them operate in the right way, but the only way to track it down is through inspections that have to be aggressive. And by the way, even under the current regime or the previous regime, I think some of them didn't get inspections for maybe every 10 years or so. So it wasn't like it's a constant harassment piece. But I've got some folks here in the corner of the hearing room who are from my district. Moms Demand Action, DMV Mothers Like Me, Women's Missionary Society. I met with them a few weeks ago, and the concern was the issue of gun violence on our streets and the desire to make sure that the federal presence continues to push hard to make sure we close those cases. You're reducing resources, you're reducing the number of agents, as Mr. Patel said. That's moving in the opposite direction. What response would you give to them with respect to the steps that you're taking to make sure not only that we stay safe, but we get even safer and do even more to get violent offenders off the street and get the guns off the street before the violent offenders get them?
So first, Congressman Ivey, you're a former prosecutor, and I'm smiling because I could see that in some of your questions. Thank you for those questions. I'm going to try to answer them all in order of how you ask them. You ask about the FBI, our budget, and Director Patel clarified that in front of the Senate, I think, and our budget includes $10.1 billion, 12,926 agents for the FBI.
I think clarification would be gentle. It was a complete flip-flop on what he said when he was here.
So they
And he was asked 3 times by
prioritized.
Ms. DeLauro just to make sure that he was right about what he had said when he was
They
testifying.
prioritize realignment of personnel to the field to carry out national security, which you just talked about, intelligence, criminal law enforcement, and criminal justice missions.
Can I do-
The
can I
budget.
do
Wait,
this?
I just keep?
If-
I only
if-
have 34 seconds to
I've
answer you,
got
and I
3
really
quick
want to
questions
answer.
for you, and I'd love
You're
to get.
asking 3
I'd love
questions
to,
and you
I'd love
haven't
to get
let me
your
answer
answers.
one.
I'd
I
love to
wanna
get your
talk about
answers in
Nibbin.
writing. Quick questions.
Nibbin.
When you were the Attorney General in Florida,
Chairman, can I answer
you
the
offered,
question?
You offered, after the Parkland shooting, I believe this is my time, under the rules, and I had,
Stop the clock.
can we stop the clock?
Stop the clock at a different.
Mr. Chairman,
Into a filibuster.
what I just said was, if you could submit your answers in writing, that would be great. I don't think I've made any kind of statement that's been accusatory with respect to her or her professional reputation. There's been no attack on her. These were just questions that were asked. I'm seeking the answers in writing, which would be great. But I have a couple others that I'd like to ask too, and we'll do them on. No, it hasn't. You cut me off when there were 30 seconds left. Yeah. So, well, that's true too. A couple of you all went over like a minute and a half.
Over almost 2 minutes.
I just would like my 30 seconds back. And then if she can submit answers in writing, that'll be fine. But, but I want to get these questions in while she's here.
Go ahead.
I want to ask the questions and she can submit the answers. This is my 5 minutes. I get to do it the way I want to do it, under the committee rules and under the House rules. These are my 5 minutes. And as I said, I have not been disrespectful to this witness. I have not. Or okay. When you were the Attorney General in Florida, after the Parkland shooting, my understanding is that you moved to ban guns, gun sales to people under 21. Is that a position that you would take now as the Attorney General? I have a bill, H.R. 2368, which does something like that. I would be interested in if you'd be willing to co-sponsor or support that bill. You also moved to enact red flag laws, allowing a judge temporarily to confiscate weapons when he or she viewed that the person was at risk of hurting himself or someone else. Is that a position you would continue to support now? And the last one is ghost guns. Ghost guns, I don't think you took a position on it back when you were the AG in Florida, but we've had 2 bills come through here in the Congress, all Democratic co-sponsors. I think there's no argument that ghost guns have any, appropriate use on the street. They only help criminals avoid prosecution. Would you support a legislative ban on ghost guns? And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers.